My marriage didn't shatter because of a third party, but because of a secret from the past, a suspended sentence waiting to crash down on me and my family. It was the moment I realized the woman I loved most was also the greatest deceiver. My life, once seemingly pristine, was suddenly stained black by a past I never knew existed. Hello everyone. Today I want to tell you a story that tore my life apart, forcing me to confront the most brutal truths. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are safe and happy. Sometimes we put too much faith in what we see in the people we love, only for everything to crumble uncontrollably when the curtain of truth is finally drawn back. Join me as I turn each page of my life's own judgment. My life has always been built on clear principles, truth, justice, and honesty. As a PhD in law at the University of Pennsylvania, I dedicated my life to studying ethics and justice, imparting lessons of integrity and responsibility to my students. I always believed that a strong society must be built on the foundation of truth, and a happy personal life is no exception. I had a dream career, was respected by my colleagues, and above all, I had a perfect family. I first met Sarah at a specialized conference in Boston where she was an architectural intern. I was a final year law student at the time. She stood out in the crowd with her radiant smile, shimmering blonde hair, and deep blue eyes sparkling with intelligence. We were quickly drawn to each other not just by our appearances, but by deep conversations about art life and dreams of a bright future. Our love developed naturally, genuinely, and deeply. After graduating, I returned to Philadelphia to begin my career, and Sarah moved here to pursue her architectural work. She quickly proved her talent, becoming a gifted architect, renowned for her exquisite and inspiring designs. She opened her own design firm, which rapidly gained recognition, attracting numerous large and small projects in Philadelphia and its surrounding areas. I was always proud of her intelligence, decisiveness, and endless creativity. We married in a warm, intimate ceremony filled with laughter and tears of happiness. I still remember the sparkle in Sarah's eyes as she held my hand, giving me a passionate kiss under an arch of white roses. We vowed to spend our lives together, sharing every joy and sorrow and building a complete home. Those vows echoed within me, and I had absolute faith in every word Sarah spoke. Our married life was a perfect picture. 2 years after our wedding, Lily, our first daughter, was born. She inherited her mother's blonde hair and deep blue eyes, along with her intelligence and quick wit. 4 years later, Ben, our adorable little boy, arrived, bringing laughter and vivacity to our home. Our house in a peaceful suburb a short drive from downtown Philadelphia was a home filled with laughter and warmth. Every morning, Sarah and I would prepare breakfast together, taking the kids to school. In the evenings, we'd gather around the dinner table, sharing stories from our day. Lily often talked about interesting lessons at school, while Ben enthusiastically showed off his scribbled drawings. On weekends, we often went on picnics at Valley Forge National Historical Park or watched a funny movie together at home. I often joked with my friends that I was the luckiest man in the world, with a talented, beautiful wife and 2 wonderful children. Both of our families were also very harmonious. My parents lived in the next town over, frequently visiting, bringing small gifts and warm advice. They always loved Sarah like their own daughter and considered her a rare daughter-in-law. Sarah's parents were a bit farther away in Boston, but they also called frequently and spent a few weeks visiting each year. They were always proud of their daughter, a successful woman with a happy family. I truly believed that this happiness was eternal, built on a foundation of love, trust, and honesty. Little did I know that beneath the monument of happiness I had so carefully nurtured, a meticulously hidden foundation of deceit lay waiting for the day it would crumble. I had believed I knew everything about Sarah, about her past. I was wrong. Our life wasn't a romantic novel, but a tragic play where I was the last to realize I was being deceived. Everything began to change subtly, like a discordant note suddenly appearing in a serene symphony. Initially, I didn't notice, attributing it to Sarah's work pressures. She started coming home later more often, saying she had to stay at the office to finalize major projects. Her work calls also extended, sometimes even into the night. I was completely understanding, knowing that the work of a talented architect like her required immense dedication. However, unusual signs began to appear more frequently and clearly. Sarah started having terrifying nightmares, waking her up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. I often saw her jolt upright, her eyes wide with panic, then try to calm herself. When I asked, she'd just say it was due to work stress or strange, meaningless dreams, just chaotic images she couldn't clearly recall. She also became more easily startled, especially by unfamiliar phone rings or when someone unexpectedly called her name from behind. I often caught her obsessively checking her phone, especially at night. She frequently held her phone texting or scrolling through social media until late, quickly turning off the screen or flipping the phone face down when I approached. She even frequently went to the bathroom with her phone or locked the bathroom door while on a call. Mysterious phone calls, messages arriving in the middle of the night, and her clumsy lies began to pile up. I started to feel an invisible wall being built between us, a growing distance I couldn't bridge. The intimacy and shared openness we once had as a couple gradually disappeared, replaced by distance and secrets. As Sarah's strange behaviors became more apparent, I started to feel uneasy. I told myself not to be too suspicious, but the intuition of someone who had studied criminal psychology and human behavior told me something was wrong. I'm a PhD in law. I've analyzed hundreds of cases, researched the most complex human behaviors. Now I was facing unsettling signs from my own wife. The feeling was truly uncomfortable, like a tightening knot in my heart. And then that name appeared, a name I didn't know, a ghost from the past that began to haunt our lives. One pouring rainy afternoon, as I was on my way home from the university, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice of a strange man, hoarse and full of mystery, echoed. "Hello, Professor James. I'm David Miller. I have very important information concerning your wife, Sarah. I think you should know the truth." My heart pounded. "What truth? Who are you? What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside a storm was brewing. "The truth about Sarah's past," the man said, his voice full of insinuation. "What she's been hiding from you all this time. Meet me at the Old Bookworm Cafe downtown at 3 p.m. this Sunday. Don't tell her anything. You won't regret it." He hung up immediately, giving me no time to react, leaving me rooted in the rain, a thousand questions echoing in my mind. I stood frozen in the rain, the phone still pressed to my ear. Sarah's past. What could she possibly be hiding from me? Thousands of questions swirled in my mind, tormenting me incessantly. I couldn't believe something so sinister could be hidden within my perfect wife. But my gut told me that this call wasn't a joke, not a misunderstanding. Something truly terrifying lay ahead. After the phone call with that man, my suspicion grew steadily. I started paying more attention to Sarah's actions. She still managed everything. Meticulously, still smiled and talked normally, but sometimes her eyes would fleetingly show anxiety, fear. I often caught her gazing absently out the window, as if deep in thought about something distant and heavy. Her phone was always clutched close, and she never let me touch it, even accidentally. If I tried to ask, she would become annoyed and quickly change the subject. I tried to open up to Sarah about what was happening, about her nightmares, about her anxieties. I told her I was always there for her, that she could share anything with me. But Sarah just offered a strained smile, saying I worried too much, that she was just tired from work. She even said that successful people like her sometimes face immense pressure and I should understand her. I accepted that explanation, but deep down the suspicion never faded. Exactly at 3 p.m. on Sunday, I arrived at the Old Bookworm Cafe with a heavy heart and full of anxiety. This small cafe was tucked away in an alley with dusty bookshelves and dim yellow lighting, creating a mysterious atmosphere as if it held countless untold stories. David Miller was already waiting in a secluded corner, sitting with his back to the door. When he turned around, I saw he was a man in his 50s with disheveled salt and pepper hair, a weathered face etched with deep wrinkles and sharp eyes filled with deep-seated hatred. He looked at me with a scrutinizing gaze, then slowly said, his voice deep, "Thank you for coming. I know you'll find what I'm about to say hard to believe, but everything is true. I have no intention of harming anyone. I just want justice to be served." David began to tell a story I couldn't possibly believe, a horrifying tale that completely overturned everything I had ever known about Sarah. He said that nearly 15 years ago, before Sarah and I met, she had been involved in a serious murder case in Boston. The victim was a young, talented architect named Michael Thompson, who had just graduated and was also Sarah's former colleague. The case was believed to be a robbery homicide, and the perpetrator had been arrested and sentenced to prison. But David asserted that the real culprit was Sarah, or at the very least, she was the one who concealed the crime, perhaps even a main accomplice. He said Michael Thompson was the son of his best friend, and he had spent years investigating this case, believing there were hidden truths, that the convicted man, Daniel Peterson, was innocent. David then presented astonishing evidence that made it impossible for me not to believe his words. He placed a thick old file on the table. There were old photos of a young Sarah with Michael Thompson taken together at company parties. There were even copies of tense text messages exchanged between them just before the incident concerning a secret and a threat. And most importantly, he placed an old voice recorder on the table and pressed play. From the device, Sarah's voice emerged clear and filled with anxiety, talking to another man. I heard her confess to doing something to eliminate Michael because he had discovered a shocking secret about their company, a secret that could ruin her career. I distinctly heard Sarah whispering, "He knows everything. I can't let him ruin everything. I have to do something." Then came another man's voice talking about arranging things and erasing traces. He also said that Sarah had staged the scene to make it look like a robbery and that a scapegoat had taken the blame for her. The name Frank was also mentioned in the recording. I was completely shocked, as if struck hard on the head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, what I was seeing. Sarah, my gentle, kind wife, involved in a murder case, perhaps even the culprit. That was impossible. But the evidence David presented was too specific, too terrifying, matching every detail of what I later found in old newspaper articles. I felt like my whole world was spinning. After that fateful meeting with David, my life felt like a horror movie where I was the main character. Every word, every glance from Sarah became a question mark. I wondered, was the woman I had loved all this time truly a hidden monster? The truth, no matter how painful, had to be revealed. I returned home in a daze, my body cold, my mind reeling. Seeing Sarah preparing dinner for the children in the kitchen, laughing happily with Lily and Ben, I couldn't believe she had such a dark past. Her image in my mind began to crack, distort, overlapping with the image of someone terrifying. I told myself I had to stay calm, had to find out everything to the end. I couldn't jump to conclusions based solely on the words and flimsy evidence of a stranger. But deep in my heart, a fear and disgust were growing. I began to discreetly investigate on my own, using all the analytical and research skills I had learned in law school. I searched online for information about the Michael Thompson case, reading old newspaper articles, public police records. Indeed, there was such a murder case in Boston 15 years ago, and a man named Daniel Peterson was sentenced to life in prison. I also found photos of a younger Sarah on old social media sites, and she genuinely knew Michael Thompson. They were even close colleagues. The details David mentioned matched what I found alarmingly well. I even found a few small articles mentioning that a talented young female architect named Sarah Wilson, my wife's maiden name, was deeply shocked after her colleague's death and had to leave the company. That night I couldn't sleep. The haunting details David had told me clung to my mind. I lay next to Sarah, listening to her steady breathing, but inside a storm raged. I pretended to be fast asleep, then quietly, as cautiously as possible, I took Sarah's phone when she finally drifted off. And what I found slammed shut the last door of hope, sending me straight into the abyss of truth. I found old messages in a hidden folder she had tried to conceal, exchanged between Sarah and a man named Frank. The content of the messages made my blood run cold. Frank mentioned Michael's case, how they had cleaned up everything, and Sarah thanked Frank for helping her get away with it, for erasing all traces. There were even messages discussing Sarah transferring a large sum of money to Frank to ensure everything stayed quiet. I also found a few blurry photos of Michael Thompson saved in the phone's temporary memory photos Sarah had tried to delete but didn't completely succeed, as if those images continued to haunt her. I am a law professor. I've taught my students about digital evidence that can never be fully erased, and now I myself was a victim of it, tormented by that very evidence. There was no longer any doubt. Sarah was not only involved in the murder case, but she was also the mastermind or main accomplice, having perfectly concealed the crime for so many years, living a deceitful life beside me. I looked at her sleeping peacefully next to me, her face serene yet terrifying. I felt disgusted, betrayed to my core. The woman I had loved, trusted, and worshipped all this time was a liar, a potential murderer. Our entire marriage, our love, all of it was built on a foundation of deceit and blood, a horrifying truth I had never imagined. The next morning I woke up early, my mind reeling. I couldn't face Sarah normally anymore. I decided to confront her, knowing it would destroy everything. After the children left for school, I turned to Sarah, who sat absently at the dining table sipping her coffee. Her eyes still held a hint of fear, as if she already knew what was coming. "Is there something you want to tell me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice dry, cold, alien. She looked at me, her eyes confused, trying to compose herself. "What are you talking about, James? What's wrong?" I threw her phone onto the table, opening the hidden folder containing those horrifying messages. The phone screen lit up, the incriminating lines starkly visible. "Don't pretend anymore. Sarah, stop acting. I know everything. The Michael Thompson case, Frank, and Michael's death. It's all a horrifying truth." Sarah's face turned ashen. Her lips trembled, her deep blue eyes wide, filled with panic and despair. She tried to grab the phone, but I held it firmly. "Tell me, Sarah. Tell me everything. Why did you do this? Why did you deceive me all these years? Do you know how much I trusted you?" She fell to her knees on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her cries choked. "I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't want to hide it from you. I was too scared. I had no other choice." Sarah began to narrate amidst sobs and broken words, each word like a knife piercing my heart. She recounted that 15 years ago, when she had just graduated and was working at a small architectural firm in Boston, Michael Thompson was her colleague and close friend. He was an honest, passionate man. Michael had discovered that their company, under the direction of a powerful and ruthless boss named Richard Vance, was involved in a large money laundering operation. He intended to report everything he knew to the police, having even gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire company. "I was so young, so naive, and so ambitious back then," Sarah sobbed, her voice choked. "I was unconsciously drawn into this scheme, initially just small things, but then I gradually sank deeper. I was terrified that if Michael reported it, my career would be ruined and I could end up in prison with my boss. My boss threatened me, saying that if I didn't help him, he would destroy my life, make sure I could never work as an architect again. I tried to persuade Michael not to do it, not to get involved in this," Sarah whispered, "but he wouldn't listen. He was an upright man. He couldn't accept deceit. He threatened to expose everything, including me, if I didn't side with him." In a moment of weakness, a moment of losing control under the threats and pressure from Richard Vance, Sarah killed Michael to protect herself and the company's secrets. She used a heavy object to hit Michael's head one night when they were working late at the office after he discovered she was helping Richard Vance. After that, she staged the scene to look like a robbery, fabricated evidence, and sought help from Frank, a man who worked for Richard Vance and specialized in dirty work. Frank received a large sum of money to find a scapegoat, and Daniel Peterson, a homeless drug addict in need of money, was forced to confess with the promise of early release and a large sum of cash. "I had no other choice, James," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling to the bone. "I was too scared. I was threatened. I just wanted to escape it and start a new life. I met you right after that, and I truly loved you. I wanted to bury that past forever, to live a normal, honest life with you and the children. I didn't want you and the children to know my true self." My heart shattered, torn into 100 pieces. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was a murderer, a deceiver. Our entire marriage, our love, all of it was built on a foundation of lies and blood. I felt disgusted, yet also pity, anger, and pain from the betrayal. I watched her cry, but my own tears had run dry. After the truth was revealed, I couldn't live a life of deceit any longer. As a PhD in law, a man who always upheld justice, I faced the most difficult choice of my life: expose the wife I loved or conceal her crime. To protect my family, to shield my children from this cruel truth. It was a fierce struggle with my conscience, a moral court I had to preside over myself. The days that followed were living hell. Our warm home suddenly became a battleground of silence and suspicious glances. Sarah lived in fear and despair, worried I would report her. She tried to cling on, begging me for forgiveness, pleading with me for the children's sake. She said she had changed, that she had lived an honest life for so many years to atone for her sins. I looked at Lily and Ben, two innocent children sleeping soundly in their room. They were everything to me, my lifeline, my hope. What would become of them if they knew the horrific truth about their mother? My reputation, my career would also be ruined if I became entangled in such a case. I am a law professor. I teach about justice, yet now I had to face a choice that went against everything I believed in. I turned to Daniel, my best friend, also a skilled lawyer. I told him everything I knew except for the detail about Sarah being the direct perpetrator. I only said that I discovered my wife was involved in an old murder case that she had concealed. Daniel was shocked. He pondered for a long moment, then looked directly into my eyes, his voice serious. "If you hide a crime, James, then you become part of that crime. The law has its own principles and justice must be served." I also met David Miller a few times after that, under the guise of someone researching the Michael Thompson case for a research project. He said he hadn't stopped seeking justice for Michael Thompson. He said he knew I was investigating and he was willing to provide more evidence if I needed it. He also said he would never give up until the real culprit paid the price. I spent many sleepless nights pondering, questioning my conscience. I envisioned Sarah being arrested, tried, and imprisoned. The image of Lily and Ben growing up without a mother, having to face the terrible truth about her, tore at my heart. But I also couldn't live a life of lies, couldn't continue to love someone who had concealed such a horrifying secret. I couldn't teach my children about ethics and justice when I myself was covering up a crime. Ultimately, I made the most difficult decision of my life, a decision I knew would change everything. I would not directly report Sarah to the authorities. I couldn't personally send the mother of my children to prison. But I also couldn't cover up the crime. I would give her one last chance to atone, but not by my side. And I would do everything I could to ensure justice was served, but in my own way, indirectly, without letting the children be directly harmed by this cruel truth. I decided to divorce. I couldn't continue this marriage when it was built on such a foundation of lies. I confronted Sarah, telling her I wouldn't report her, but I also couldn't continue living with her. I loved my children and I would protect them from this cruel truth. I would tell them that we were divorcing due to irreconcilable differences, not because of their mother's dark secret. Sarah burst into uncontrollable sobs. She begged me to change my mind, saying she would do anything to atone. But I was too tired of the lies. I was too hurt. I just wanted it all to end. The divorce process was silent and heavy. We didn't dispute much of the property. I just wanted Sarah to leave our lives as smoothly as possible. I gained full custody of both children, Lily and Ben. Sarah accepted all conditions, perhaps because she knew she was wrong, or perhaps because she feared I would change my mind and report her. She moved out to live alone. After the divorce, I secretly reconnected with David Miller. I provided him with the information I found on Sarah's phone clues about Frank and the money laundering scheme Sarah had mentioned. I told him I wanted justice to be served for the real culprits to pay the price, but I didn't want Sarah's reputation publicly ruined, especially for my children's sake. I asked David to find another way, a more discreet way to bring the culprits to light without Sarah's direct involvement or public exposure of her name. David understood my intention and he promised to do everything he could to fulfill my wish and bring justice to Michael Thompson. He said he wouldn't let Daniel Peterson suffer an unjust sentence for another day. My life became much more difficult raising two children alone. I had to shoulder the roles of both father and mother. Some nights I had to stay up late preparing lectures, grading exams, then woke up earlier than usual to prepare breakfast and take Lily and Ben to school. I learned to do everything from cooking simple meals, doing laundry, to helping the children with homework and listening to their teenage confessions. I spent every spare moment making up for their emotional needs. Time passed and my emotional wounds gradually healed, but the truth about Sarah's past remained an invisible burden, a secret I would carry for the rest of my life. I chose to keep that secret to protect my children, but I believed that justice, though delayed, would still find those who deserved punishment. And indeed, the verdict was delivered not for Sarah, but for those who had committed the real crimes. A few years after our divorce, I received news from David Miller. He had succeeded. The evidence I provided, along with David's persistent investigation and some of Michael Thompson's former colleagues, led to the reopening of the Michael Thompson case. Frank, who helped Sarah stage the scene and find a scapegoat, was arrested. Through his testimony, the colossal money laundering ring operated by Richard Vance was exposed. Richard Vance, Sarah's former boss, the one who forced her onto the path of crime and was the main mastermind in the case, was also arrested and sentenced to life in prison for money laundering, bribery, and complicity in Michael Thompson's murder. Most importantly, Daniel Peterson, the homeless man who had suffered an unjust sentence for so many years in prison, was exonerated and set free. I visited him in prison after he was acquitted. Daniel Peterson looked at me with grateful eyes, saying he never thought this day would come. I felt immense relief to see justice finally served for an innocent man. David told me that during the investigation, Sarah's name was also mentioned in Richard Vance's records and Frank's testimony, but only as a minor witness, someone who had worked in the company and was threatened. There was no direct evidence linking her to the murder of Michael Thompson, as Frank and Richard Vance had concealed this truth very carefully to protect themselves and their criminal network. However, through Frank's testimony and other circumstantial evidence, Sarah admitted that she knew about the money laundering scheme and Michael's death and had remained silent out of fear. This led to her facing a few minor charges for concealing information and failing to report a crime, but not to the extent of going to prison. She received a suspended sentence and had to perform community service for many years. I don't know what my emotions were then. An immense relief that justice was served for the innocent and the culprits paid the price, or a lingering pang of remorse, knowing that Sarah, though not imprisoned, still had to carry the burden of her past, a lifelong sentence from her conscience, and the loss of the family she had personally destroyed. A scar that would never heal. Life is truly complex, and sometimes those who stand between good and evil are the ones who suffer the most. As for Sarah, I heard she lived a rather reclusive life after the divorce and after the case was reopened. Her architectural career was no longer as brilliant as before. She tried to rebuild her reputation and career, but everything was very difficult. Her old friends gradually distanced themselves from her. She found peace in charitable work, especially helping women with troubled pasts and underprivileged children. She dedicated most of her time to those endeavors as a way to atone for her past mistakes. Lily and Ben gradually grew up, becoming wonderful, strong, and independent children. Lily, now a young woman, inherited her mother's intelligence and my compassion. She always stands up for the vulnerable and dreams of becoming a lawyer to uphold justice. Ben is energetic and passionate. He always brings laughter to everyone and has a strong passion for architecture, just like his mother. I regularly take the children to visit their paternal grandparents, and my parents are always a solid support system for us. We never spoke negatively about Sarah in front of the children. I just told them that their mother had found another path to live a more meaningful life, and we still loved her in our own way. I still maintain limited contact with Sarah primarily through phone calls or messages to discuss the children's schooling and health. She also regularly visits the children, but without the eagerness or the lies. She has become much calmer, and in her eyes I see genuine remorse, acceptance of her fate, and even a bit of peace after so many years of concealment. Perhaps her greatest sentence wasn't legal punishment, but the verdict of her conscience and the loss of the family she had personally destroyed, a wound that would never heal. Looking back at my life, I realized that even though my symphony was painfully broken, I could still compose new notes, notes of resilience, of unconditional love for my children, and of fighting for justice in my own way. I lost a perfect marriage, but I found a stronger self, a more genuine relationship with my children. Happiness isn't about the absence of storms, but about how we weather them to find peace and learn to accept life's scars. I learned to live with the truth no matter how brutal it may be. My story ends here. It's a story of truth, of deceit, of betrayal, and of the journey to find justice. I lost so much, but I also learned so much. I learned that trust is the most fragile thing, and the truth, no matter how painful, must always be faced. I didn't choose to expose my wife in court, but I chose a different path for justice to be served, a path I hope will bring peace to everyone, especially to Michael Thompson's soul and Daniel Peterson's innocence. I didn't cover up a crime. I simply chose the way that would cause the least harm to the innocent people in this story, especially my children. If this story touched your heart, or if you have different thoughts on the choices I had to face, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Every opinion you share is a valuable contribution, helping me and others see life from many different angles. Let's share our stories and the lessons we've learned to grow stronger together. And if you found this story meaningful, please help me spread its message by liking this video and sharing it with anyone you think needs to hear it. Your support is a huge motivation for me to continue sharing more stories, more hard-won lessons from life. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my latest videos full of emotional life stories, revealed secrets, and profound insights. Thank you all for listening. I wish you all happiness and peace, and always cherish the truth in your lives. Goodbye for now.